My name is Diane Shelpa, and I am a board member of the Yellowstone Gateway Museum Foundation. Our foundation supports the museum's mission to share the incredible history and prehistory and natural history of Southwest Montana with our community, all of you, and our visitors. You know, we do this through philanthropy, and we do it through volunteerism, and we do it through presenting programs like the one you're about to see tonight. But before we begin, I'd like to recognize the hardworking Executive Director of the Yellowstone Gateway Museum, Mark Brammer. I want to recognize our Commissioner, who's our liaison to the museum, Brian Wells. And I just want to acknowledge that both the County Museum and the Foundation Museum are staffed entirely by volunteers. That is the Foundation Board and the Museum Board. We're entirely a volunteer board. But on top of that, the museum itself has so many other volunteers. These are people who catalog museum objects, who help build exhibits, who do so many things. So if anybody in the audience, I know there are people in the audience who are members of either the county board or the foundation board or volunteer at the museum or on the staff, just raise your hand so we can thank you. We also owe a huge thank you to the sponsors who made tonight's program possible. Carol Lalani for offsetting the cost of the use of the Shane Center tonight. Our longtime partners, Elk River Arts and Lecture, Friends of Park County, the Murray Hotel, who provides lodging for our speakers, the Park County Community Foundation is the major supporter of this program series, our partners at Park County Environmental Council and the Tom Minor Basin Association. I also want to do a special shout out to Neptune's. For those of you who were at the museum last night, they provided the drinks for the reception that we had, and we're really grateful to Neptune's as well. We are accepting donations to help offset this program series for the rest of the year and for next year's series. If you would like to provide a donation to the museum, you can scan that little QR code right down there. And that'll give you a link to the Museum Foundation's website. You'll be able to donate directly online through that link. Now, for tonight's journey, I don't know about you all, but when I drive down Paradise Valley, actually sometimes I squint my eyes and I look out across the prairie, the shortgrass prairie, and the agricultural lands and the rangeland. And I imagine a time hundreds or thousands of years ago when bison were the dominant species in the valley. And I think about those times when the bighorn sheep would come down from one mountain range in great numbers, go across the valley and up into the other mountains, when there were more pronghorn and when there was just generally so many more animals. And when I think about that, it's pretty fascinating. But even more fascinating, I think, is to consider the people who lived alongside these animals. How did they live here? How did they thrive here for thousands of years? Well, tonight's guest has some incredible insights for us. Dr. Craig Lee specializes in mapping engineered landscapes. These are these massive stone walls stretching for miles through Paradise Valley and certainly other places throughout the West. He'll help us understand these stone drive lines, hunting lines, and alpine ice patches that were used together as part of this really sophisticated system of hunting. His work proves that people living here 10,000 years ago weren't just surviving. They were master observers of wildlife. They were master engineers, and they were incredible hunters, and that's what we'll learn about tonight. Some of you may know Dr. Lee for his leading work in high-altitude archaeology. He's a professor of archaeology and sociology at Montana State University and a research associate at the Institute of Arctic and Alpine Research. He's also affiliated with Colorado University Boulder, and he's probably best known for his office being way high up, on a mountain among a patch of melting ice. So he spends a lot of time in the mountains. And he's found some really amazing things. One of the things that that is just astounding to me is this hunting dart made of birch that's 10,000 years old. It just melted out of the ice. And here's a piece of wood that's been around for such a long time that melted out. His work in the Yellowstone area is so vital that he was awarded the prestigious Camp Monaco Prize for his efforts in conservation and the Department of the Interior's Conservation Partners in Conservation Award. These are really, really great honors and so deserved. What's special about Dr. Lee, though, is his approach. It's the respect that he brings to his work. He doesn't work in a vacuum. He's out there in the dirt and in the ice, working side by side with partners from the Blackfeet Nation, the Salish and Kootenai, the Crow, many tribal partners that he works with. And he's not, just looking for artifacts. He's helping us reconnect or maybe connect for the first time with a history that's literally melting away. So we're lucky to have him here to share what he's found and what he's learned. Please help me in welcoming pioneering ice patch archaeologist, explorer, and cultural bridge, Dr. Craig Lee.
Thank you. Appreciate you for that. Thank you very much, Diane. That's absolutely an outstanding introduction. I can't halfway live up to that. And we'd already worked it out. I was going to come around this way, but I'd started leaning against that rail. So thank you. I didn't mean to startle you. Let's see. I think I have no idea. I'm going to take a quick look at my timer here. I'm not going to go really longer than about 50 minutes, I think, and leave a couple minutes for questions and answers, and then we'll go from there. How I came to be giving a talk on drivelines and ancient hunting strategies in the Greater Yellowstone area, but really trying to tie it into where we are here in Livingston, just north of the Paradise Valley and just south of the Shields River Valley. It's almost by accident that I got involved with the drivelines, and it was really under the auspices of a number of my friends and colleagues, two of whom have now passed away. One fellow who'd be known to you would be Dr. Larry Laron, who's an archaeologist of some repute here in Livingston, and then his long-term colleague Jerry Breckey's also passed away. But their efforts, along with Tom Jurdy's efforts, really Tom did a lot of the legwork, mapping some of the driveline complexes that are in the Paradise Valley to our south. I wanted to share aspects of that mapped driveline complex, and I wanted to share it with folks who were working on drivelines elsewhere in North America. And the reason I wanted to share it with them is I thought that our drivelines were better than the drivelines they were working on. And my colleague Maria Zdania, who's a longtime resident now of the Blackfeet Reservation, she's a remarkable archaeologist and based in Arizona, does field projects at incredible levels. And I wanted to share the drivelines with Maria, and I just said, Maria, can you get over this? Look at this. I mean, I know the complexes you're working on, these are maybe 2 or 3 times the extent of what you're working with. And she just said, I only have one life, Craig. I can't do anything more, basically. But she encouraged others, basically, I would say, not just me, because I also only have one life, and it's not necessarily my forte or expertise. So in a way, I guess what I'd like to leave you with, opening this talk by leaving the talk, is that there's so much that's not known. There's a lot of work that can be done in this area. I'm hardly trying to stand up here and tell you we've got all the answers, you can go home, right? I mean, there's job security for young archaeologists, middle-aged archaeologists, later in life archaeologists that want to get boots on the ground. So I do tend to wander, and they told me it was okay, so I've taken this microphone out, and I'll bounce along through some slides here. Kicking off right at the start, I don't want to bury the lead, and I also don't want to forget the acknowledgments. It's a partial list. You can see the mea culpa behind both the participants and also the funding providers over there on the left. One of the folks who's in the room, she's about halfway up, there she is waving, Sari, Dare Sam, and her spouse Scott Dursum are both in this image for scale, right? So you get a sense of kind of these are magnificent environments, and you can see there's instability in this face. I mean, I don't have to go into the physics and tell you what's going on there, other than that it seems like that face is kind of melting in an odd space. We've been plying this work for quite a long time now. My first ice patch archaeological project was a quarter century ago. I'm going to kind of rocket through a little bit of this just to bring you up to speed, to give you some framework, and then I'm going to try to weave it around as to how it came to involve Drivelines in Paradise Valley. Some of you might be familiar with actually one of the living people here. That's Reinhold Messner. He's the first person to climb Everest without oxygen. He's out here showing off his skills. He's climbed up to Schneedeljoch Pass wearing just some kind of day hiker trainers, and then his pretty wild buddy right here, Hans Kammerlander, still robbing his 1980s ski closet, right? But busting out the turquoise and the pink. But the person who's really the thing they're interested in is Utsi. So Utsi the Iceman. He's got a entire purpose-built museum in Bolzano, Italy. I've met him twice. He's cold, right? He's got a poker face. It's unreal. At any rate, the thing that's in Kammerlander's hand is this wooden object that they'd actually been trying to help hack Otzi out of the ice with. Turns out this is actually part of Utsi's pack frame. So I mention this because a lot of times when you encounter things in these ice environments, not unlike when you're in the back of your freezer, you kind of start wondering, what was that? I don't remember. It's been, a really long time since we had stuffing. I think this is right. And so it requires you to sort of get outside yourself and open your eyes to what might be present. Biologist there, that's Gary Kusiak. I've abused him for years because he's got that huge smile on his face, and holding in his hands there he's got feces. So that's how you know he's a biologist, right? He's gleefully holding on to this caribou poop. You can see he's got a gun strapped on his back. He's out hunting. He's out hunting sheep. He's actually, I think they're stone sheep in this part of the Yukon territory. I mean, it's a version of bighorn sheep. The thing that got him excited about this is he knew that the caribou herd in this part of the Yukon was extirpated, that means killed off, in about 1920. And so he's either thinking there's a ghost herd of caribou that we don't know about, or there's something that's atypical that's happened at this particular ice patch. Now this is in Norway to the right of the image. That shows some of the offending culprits. The caribou and other animal species will go to the ice for a variety of reasons. In the high Arctic, it's really to escape insect predation. They don't want to be bitten and chewed on by botflies and warbleflies, and so they'll do their utmost to get away from them. Actually, it's pretty incredible Sami hunting narrative. So this will be kind of some ethnographic work talking about when the insects are really, really bad. The reindeer, this is in Norway, are more scared of the insects than they are of hunters that are killing the reindeer on the ice patches. So you can imagine, this is a pretty amazing construct. So at any rate, he's also happens to be the biologist for Yukon territory. So he's got this caribou dung, and he, as the biologist, has the wherewithal and money, dollars, to go and get radiocarbon dates on it. Turned out it was 4,000 years old. So yeah, there's definitely a little melt going on there. My colleagues and I gave 2 talks. What did I do? Come on, there we go. My colleagues and I did a number of different things, and I was explaining to some of the students, as a part of this program, the Yellowstone Gateway Museum Board likes to try to get folks such as myself into the schools, so I visited with the entirety of the 5th graders at one of the middle schools today. There must have been 100 or so of them there, and then I went and visited a Native American Studies class at the high school. I was talking with the Native American Studies students about this particular really showy image. It's a pretty early period GIS map. It was supposed to be telling us where to go look for ice patch archaeology in a place called the Wrangell Mountains, which is it's in Alaska. It's really proximate to the Yukon area where I was just speaking about. as it turns out, it really hones in or focuses in on those bright red areas that are actually coinciding with massive tongues of glacial ice. That one right there is the Nebezna, and it's the longest inland flowing glacier in North America. I mean, we're looking at 40 or 45 miles worth of glacial ice there. It turns out the model, this MAPIS, modeling archaeological potential of ice and snow, was not very useful for us finding the types of archaeology that we were interested in. But what it was useful at doing was springing money out of the National Science Foundation to get us up there to Alaska. But we did, boy howdy, I keep doing that. Let's see if I can not. All right, so this is actually on the Nebezna Glacier. This is coming in and landing on the toe with some really crackerjack bush pilots. One of these guys, a guy by the name of Kirk Ellis, he sells videos, or I should say they sell videos of him doing pretty nutso things in these bush planes. They do short takeoffs, short landings, hammerheads up box end canyons. Which, when I was slightly younger, I thought some of that was cool. I am subject to motion sickness, so he definitely could always check the box and find my limit. And we spent a lot of time walking around on these massive features. I would tell you we didn't find much. It was Brian Clark standing there. He went off, I think, to California and got a PhD. He's a climate scientist guy. We did find interesting animal remains. You got a canid paw up above. You've got a canid skull down below. It's a duck over there on the right. I don't know what the duck is doing, but there it is. And we actually did turn up some archaeology. Wasn't the type of ancient archaeology that our Canadian colleagues had kind of cued us into, but it was still something that was of interest. Yes, a horse with snowshoes. Isn't that also wild? So what the photo of was actually, this one came out of a cafe somewhere in Alaska, one of these kind of roadhouse places. But the types of archaeology we were finding were literally roadhouses along that ice network. So in order to get to the gold fields, which were on the north side of the Wrangell Mountains, and this is in a time before roads, rest assured, you certainly wouldn't want to traipse around through Alder Hell and all the rest of this sort of thing to get around here and get up into like the Shoshana gold fields. It's a lot easier to pop up and over the Roan or Kennecott glaciers and let's say come down the Shoshana, and you could beat the other people going to the gold rush by a month and a half. And as per usual, the people who were really making the money were the ones who were mining the miners, setting up the roadhouses and selling them the sheep, the stone sheep that they were killing and frying up in the pans and so forth. So at any rate, I talked about that MAPIS thing, and I talked about how we had to evolve and develop our own thought process on what it is that's driving animal behavior in these alpine spaces. I don't have to show you, pick a couple pictures of a few little caribou hanging out on the ice there. Do you see the trail networks that are laid in to the ground, right? This is not one little caribou that's wandering in there. This is like encoded in the minds of caribou. One of the things I would go off on a whole other topic, but I went to a particular location in Yellowstone that was absolutely hammered by the '88 wildfires, and all the trees had collapsed and fallen all over, burned off all of the duff and the elk trails in the alpine underneath that duff that were not being used at all because of the downed trees now. It's just generational. That's the only way to describe it. So these animals, quite possibly seeking refuge, again, just to highlight the insect. So I think these were warble flies. They get in underneath the skin, and then they make a hole about the size of a dime when they erupt out of you. That's a prepared caribou hide up there. So you can see why the animals would want to stay away from it. After we used the first round of that model to get us up to Alaska, we realized that our best bet, and one of our limitations with that modeling in Alaska, was that we didn't have the resolution of the imagery. It's still, to this day, the satellite imagery is crappy in central Alaska. The resolution is like a 30 meter by 30 meter square for 1 pixel. You just can't see anything at 30 by 30 resolution taken from space, but if you're flying along in one of those little bush planes, you can look down and you can say, oh, That looks like a bunch of caribou dung in front of that snowbank. It's Brian Clark again standing in the caribou dung. We go to a couple of these locations and we start identifying the things that were in our mind's eye that we might find in association with them. You're looking at a wooden arrow shaft, you're looking at an antler projectile point. You might think, oh, they go together one and one. These things are separated in time. These two artifacts are separated in time by about 500 years. So our initial assumption was they go together, but the reality of it is it's two different occurrences. We just found them together because they're lying, they've melted out of the ice and they're exposed here on the ground below it. Do you follow that story? See what I'm saying? You can see the knock end of the arrow here poking out of the ground, and then these carved antler points, frequently they would have an end blade on them. In the earliest time periods, they'd have a stone end blade. Then actually they would use native copper. So that doesn't mean it's copper that's been, the copper around Kennecott, for instance, famous copper mines, the copper is so pure and it occurs in such large nuggets, basically, that you can just work it without having to smelt it. You don't have to do any of the reduction of ore to get the copper. Okay, so time goes by and we really have been collaborative with colleagues. I suspect absolutely none of you have archaeology, the special issue of glacier archaeology from the German group Archaeology in Deutschland. It's all in German too, for that matter. But this is where, AI and stuff comes out in terms of translation. If I want to know what I wrote, I have to get it translated back to me. But in the normal context, right, the things that show up in this picture, like these chipstone end blades here, it's just a classic kind of biface projectile point. I think this may or may not be, it's a different one, microblade core, and then she's got one in her hand over there. But these organic elements and the sinew lashing and the fletching, most of that doesn't preserve in the archaeological record. You've got to get it from a really unusually preservative space. So interstage right or left or from the screen here, you've got a very photogenic shot of an ice patch in the greater Yellowstone area. Our headwaters, actually, this one is your headwaters. And it's a neat one. I mean, it's kind of that song of fire and ice. I think I should use that as a title for something, right? But it's amazing because you can see the valleys filled with the smoke, and you can see this little gem up here in the high country with it. Ice patches, they're different than glaciers. They are these small little bodies that kind of exist in a Goldilocks state, right? It's just so. They pick up enough snow. If everything is going well, they pick up enough snow that they can persist year over year, but they get enough sun that they can't fatten up and become glaciers and start to flow on their own process. Just like so many things in life, it's also worthwhile pointing out that many of them don't exist in either that 1 or 0 state, right? It's kind of that modern version of quantum where you can have the central portion of this thing pick up enough mass and start to flow, but that doesn't mean that it all has to flow. That means that these margins can remain intact and remain stable. If you have the intact ice and it's generally speaking not moving, it can turn out to hold materials that are exceedingly ancient, again, in sort of a just so context. Just for context, see how many times I can use that word. In Alaska, with that MAPIS model, we helicoptered to 285 locations. Again, this is a guy that does not like planes, does not really like helicopters, and flying them in the mountains in high wind is just like a recipe for, I was single-handedly keeping the Dramamine company in business, and you do that for a month straight, it definitely impacts your nervous system. But at any rate, we found 5 sites. So our best predictive model was 285 locations. Of those, only 5 were productive. So I don't really worry too much when I talk in the lower latitudes. I know one location that frequently you could go there and you could see 70 things that are presumptively ice patches, and only one of them is actually an archaeological site, so far as I know. So, oh boy, I feel bad for this guy. I've showed his pictures so many times. Shirtless, wearing jean shorts. That's a hard look. But he's hanging out in Boston, and he's helping me demonstrate what's going on with an ice patch. So the ice patch on the right that my colleague Eric Parrish took a real image and then posterized it and then kind of cut it in half. So you're looking into it and you're seeing those black bands. Hardly need a laser pointer to show you those. But what those are old melt surfaces. They're surfaces that a significant amount of melt occurred, and basically when that melt occurs, it armors up the surface of the glacier. So this snowbank in Boston, following on a big winter, has basically armored up, and it's gotten all of that grit and grunge scraped off the streets in Boston. It's even been colonized on the surface with vegetation. I mean, there's growing grass. In the high Arctic of Russia, we call this yedema. So you can find this vegetation that's growing on top of just these huge ice lenses that date back to the Pleistocene. If we got a whole bunch more snow in Boston in very early as September, let's say, and that reburied, right, that surface of snow would have to melt off to get back down to that organic rind that's sitting in there. The reason the organic rinds are important, it's not that they don't stop the melting in totality, but what they cause the ice to have to do is undergo a phase shift. It has to go from being ice to water to run off the surface, whereas like most of the snow in your yard doesn't run off down your gutter, it ablates. It goes straight into the atmosphere. So having that rind, that armor on the ice allows it to persist. And now if a severe melt occurs, this lag can collapse on top of that lag, can collapse on top of that lag, and so forth. But it's kind of each time that melt advances, the ice patch kind of bulks up a little bit more and says, okay, we're going to try to retard the melt. It really doesn't say that. Well, maybe it does. I don't speak it all that well. You might look at this image and say, oh, that's great. There's a lot of red dots on a map. Good stuff must be happening. I mean, the world's a mighty big place, and those red dots represent the sum total of places where ice patch archaeology have occurred. So there's a lot of places that really we haven't gotten to, but we've learned a lot, right? The ice patches in North America and in Norway, most of them relate to hunting. That's more northern North America, or our neck of the woods, even in the greater Yellowstone. There's one ice patch in British Columbia, one ice patch on the border of Italy and Austria that has human remains in it. There's a human came out of an ice patch in British Columbia, named him Kawa de Dansishi, long ago person found. That's a Southern Shoshone dialect. It's an Athabascan dialect. Interestingly enough, the genetics of that individual demonstrated he's probably a coastal person, most likely Tlingit, that was in the interior. Helps to break down our conception of people being bounded and conscripted somehow, right? Not being able to move around. And then the South American discoveries, that's a whole other ball of wax. They tend to be a lot of incidental preservation in ice where Incan groups in particular were making sacrifices and putting people up at elevation, and they accidentally became ensconced in ice. A couple little thoughts for you here. We're looking south to north. This is also from that Gletscherarchäologie in Deutschland manuscript, but it's kind of a nice transect of ice patches moving from south to north. Make sure I get another shout out here to my long-term colleagues with the Forest Service. That'd be the Custer, the Gallatin, the Shoshone, but also Yellowstone and Glacier National Park. It takes a huge cast to move this work along. One of the things that I think has been most impactful about it is people are really keen on those organic tools. I mean, there's a large population that just understands Native American archaeology. They have an interest in it in general, but they associate it with a lot of the chipstone stuff. And when you can get access to that organic material, it really feeds the fires and the imagination. And I think it even helps with laypersons who maybe haven't had as much exposure to it, and you can use it to get messages across or get points across. One of them that I could give you from this is that this is not some kind of a dart that was a trick shooting dart. It was the curved part was bowed by what my colleague Bob Anderson describes as a granular flow of slush It almost broke it. It was sloughing down the face of the ice patch. It was super saturated. It was so close to breaking into fragments. It didn't wonderfully. It was stepped on by an animal, most likely a sheep. There's absolutely a sheep hoof print in it there. This portion was probably down in the ice more and better preserved. All well and good. You can see the end down here where the projectile point would have been attached. Preservation so amazing. It's even got something that I've talked about as perhaps being ownership marks. So it's a way for you to differentiate tools. Also could suggest that you have craft specialization. There's a whole giant talk we could do on that. So if you weren't making your own tools, you might need to mark your tools in some way, shape, or form. Or if you were hunting with me, you'd want to know who shot it in the butt and who shot it where you were supposed to. Our colleague, Mark Brammer, at the Yellowstone Gateway Museum, there's a very small exhibit that was put in there, and I asked him kindly. My colleague Bill McConnell is an absolute master craftsperson, and he made a replica of this foreshaft. And I asked Mark if he'd let us bring it in here, and he had a set of gloves and so forth. And so in best museum practice, I would tell you should always be holding things with gloves, but I'm just worried that I might fumble it and drop it up here. And since it's a replica, I'm going to be bold and just grab it. But avert your eyes, Mark, avert your eyes. So this is what it would have looked like. This is the same dimensions as best we can get. It's about 1 meter and 10 centimeters long. So again, not for trick shots. We've put an appropriately aged projectile point, an appropriately styled projectile point on the end. You can see this conical base down here. This may come back and be of interest to you if you remember that conical base. I've got something really exciting that I haven't showed in any talks to this point in time. The thing that Bill did is he went forward and he conducted a number of experiments. He made some very short shaftments with fletching to go on the back end to see if he could make this fly. What he actually worked out in the end was having a main shaft and then having a long foreshaft and having them be roughly of equal length, and then putting them together. You have almost a 2 meter long dart there. And if you hold on to that with your atlatl or your throwing board and you chuck it at an animal, the goal is that you, unlike an arrow, the students were just fascinated, the fifth graders were fascinated about broadhead arrows. They wanted to know like the ballistics of the speed of arrows versus darts. One of the kids said, "How many grains is that?" I was like, "I don't know. You're asking the wrong guy." But I said, let's look at it this way. Rather than like what our Fish, Wildlife, and Parks wants to know, the draw power of your bow, the speed of the dart, the speed of the arrow, as if it's a bullet, this is more like hitting something with a piece of artillery, right? So you might see, the animal hopefully doesn't see it coming, but by gosh, if it connects with it, all of this mass is stacked up behind that projectile point. Bill has thrown replicas like this basically through the door of his shed. Now, his shed wasn't coming right for him, right? But rest assured, if you can throw it through a plank of wood, it's going to go through a hide of an animal. And then the reason it's detachable, the reason it has that conical base on it is thunk, you get it into the animal jumps, the back end falls off. You don't have to worry about refletching a whole new component. So the technology that goes into this, there's nothing accidental about it. In a way, the thing that we as people who are interested in archaeology obsess about the most are these chipstone end blades. In the grand scheme of things, this is absolutely the least consequential portion of the entire tool. The further away you get from the human being, as a matter of fact, the less investment you put into the time. Your clothing, for instance, like if the clothing is what's keeping you warm, even if you don't have food, you don't screw around with your clothing. You fix your rips, right? You make sure you got watertight seals and those sorts of things. The device that you use to propel your darts, it's like your gun. You take really good care of your gun, better care than you take of your bullets, right? Again, the thing that's getting closer to you, it's got the fletching. This takes so much effort to lash it. He's just cobbled the design element together, but it's not inaccurate. We know from particularly specimens in Alaska that combinations of red and black common on darts. So I'll set it down and go back to my mic. Thank you for letting me do that, Mark. And we hear it collapse back there. And it's safely back there. Okay, so one of the other things, and I've got two good friends and colleagues in the room, and I remain eminently chagrined that I have not completed this. It's not all hunting technology. There's other types of things up here. This is what appears to be likely a Fremont-style basket. It's 1,500 years old. It's got rods and coils and willow. I've got a draft manuscript with my colleague Ed Jolly put together on it. I'm the pig in the python, though. I can't get, I haven't been able to get my time clear to finish writing it up, and I'm chagrined, and I'll just leave it there for a second so you can marvel. When my colleagues saw this, including like Pei-Lin Yu and Halcyon LaPointe, their level of recognition for it was very different than mine. They said, this is women. This is women's work, and traditionally, ethnographically, the people who made baskets tended to be women. So to find gender in the archaeological record is a really neat thing, and this is a significant find. It's not inconsequential. There's other stuff that you come across, right? It takes time to investigate and look. This is my colleague, Dr. Rachel Reckon. She got her PhD at Cambridge. She is the Montana State Parks. She's one of two archaeologists for the state park. She lives up in Helena now. She was insisting that I come over and take a look at this thing she'd identified, and I kind of glanced at it over my shoulder, and I said, Rachel, that's wolf scat. Leave it alone. And she said, it's not wolf scat. Stop screwing around. Come over here. And what you hopefully will see, can you see how that appears to be twisted? It's actually cordage. I submitted it to my colleague, Beth Shapiro, who left academia and went to a company called Colossus. They do ancient DNA. She studied the DNA of this. She's the person who made the dire wolves that showed up in the news not so long ago. I don't have a dog in the fight of whether that's a good thing or not. Boy, that was a fun pun. Okay. This is a horse. It's a horsehair cordage, but what the DNA was able to show is it actually has a parasite load on it that is consistent with a yearling or younger horse. So what we think happened is that a person who had a horse, the horse got a hold of this cord, and for some reason, if they were trying to bridle it in some fashion, it managed to chew it up and swallow it, and then the cordage passed through, and the yearling is still a nursing colt, and so the parasite load is associated with nursing horse. I mean, you just can't, who would think, who would think? It's like, get away from it, Rachel, right? She's like, no, we're going to deal with this. Carol Murray here, and her words are eloquent, John's are eloquent, Francis's are eloquent, Mike Dergelow's are eloquent. I had tried to, and maybe went a little over the top, talking with the Native American Studies students at the high school about just how in this day and age, I feel like the arc of archaeology has become more humanistic in North America, at least. And I think it's a good thing because, boy, there are still a lot of members of descendant communities around who have a real tangible, tactile relationship with this cultural material. It's part of their world. It's part of their understanding, and kind of co-opt the Martin Luther King's, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. I sort of feel like in our space as archaeologists, we need to use our voice to amplify Native American concerns. That's a no-brainer. Some OSHA violations here on the cover of a magazine. That's hardly the worst. And I cut so much out of this talk just to be able to get around to the drivelines and so forth. We're drilling in one of these ice patches. We're pulling out these ice cores. What you're looking at there is one of those frozen lags. So I'm not just making that up. We checked. I actually have 3 current projects funded, one from the NSF, a 5-year NSF, that's $1 million to work in the Chugach National Forest, Wrangell St. Elias, Yellowstone, and Glacier National Park. I also have projects funded in Glacier National Park and in Yellowstone National Park to do more of this stuff, to try to capture these things before they're gone. If you could see in there, if you can envision one of the things that's a dominant element of this lag, aside from the feces, is grasshoppers. It's just tons and tons of grasshoppers. So is it the Rocky Mountain locust? Is it Melanopsis spiridus? The only way to know is to look at their genitalia, and I have not yet been able to find students who say, you want me to look at what, Dr. Lee? In feces? Okay, this guy. Bouncing forward, I mean, and again, I don't want to have you have this warm and fuzzy sense of the talk in totality. At the end of a field season, just the year before last, I went out to that location where we were coring. That's why I included it. And my colleague here is pointing at the ground. When we were done coring, when we destroyed the coring device, and then shipped it back with chagrin to the National Science Foundation, it was $17,000 to have that coring device out for one day. So, and that was the day that actually we were working with the basket too, and my wife was again saying, shut it down, come look at this. I was like, what are you talking about? Time is money. When we destroyed the coring device, Jay Kine, who's a really neat driller, spent most of his career drilling in Antarctica and Greenland, he said, we tend to throw the cutting heads down the hole as a marker for where we've been. Not that you would expect anybody to get to the bottom of an ice sheet in Greenland or Antarctica, but what my colleague is pointing at here, and I realize in my hodgepodging of slides I took away the close-up slide showing it, is the cutting head. So that core went 2.5 meters deep, and we radiocarbon dated the lags in it. The bottommost lag was 7,000 years, and that was 10 years ago. So in 10 years, we've lost 2.5 meters of ice. Basically, the ice is all gone. So all of those lags have collapsed, and 7,000 years worth of ice is gone in a decade. I told the students I don't really have a dog in the fight about whether it's anthropogenic warming or not, because I don't need to. This is incontrovertible, right? The way I tried to describe it to them, it's not unlike a library that's on fire. You come across the library that's on fire, you get the books out of the library, then you can stand around on the lawn afterwards pointing fingers at each other and saying, you did it, right? We're not there. We take the plant lists, for instance, that we get out of the feces. Yes, I know my colleague Kathy Poosman is very long-suffering. She spends day upon day with it, week upon week with it, actually month upon month with it, sorting through it. Share it with the tribes, Shoshone, Bannock, Eastern Shoshone, Northern Cheyenne, basically anybody that wants it, and I do it in this sort of not in a quid pro quo way. Basically, I ask for nothing in return. Some of my tribal colleagues are very concerned about alpine plant communities where they concentrate at high elevation. They become more easily harvestable for ceremonial purposes, for purposes that keep their culture hale. Climate change impacting the plants too, but we can provide a record of many thousands of years. I cut out all kinds of coring stuff because I am going to talk about the Drivelines. There it is. That's the cutting heads. It's funny because when he first found it, he said, it's a curved piece of metal. I said, it's a horseshoe. Leave it alone. He was like, no, you come over here and look at this. Stop screwing around. And then I'm a Bozeman hawk. I know I have to point it out. So there's my hawk hat. All right, now I have to flee Livingston, right? The ice patches, they're hanging in there, but they're pretty beat up. There's some archaeological material showing up. In many instances, it's stuff only a truly nerdy archaeologist would love. It's just a shaft fragment there. That one was about 3,500 years old. But I don't lean into the doom and gloom of it. This is what I lean into. It's not a posed shot. I was trying to get the students to pose for a while, but they just kept screwing around. So I just took the picture with them, just kind of cavorting and having fun. And as far as I'm concerned, right, I've had a quarter century of incredible opportunities to go out and collect and engage with and identify archaeological material that would not be there if we hadn't put up the effort. We can share it with future generations. I think it still has meaning for future generations, and I think the training opportunities and the big smiles on the students is worth a lot. I did think that's also particularly funny. It's not that I exhausted them, it's that I'm such a slow hiker that they were able to go back to the car and nap. And then everybody always loves to see a puppy, but when you recognize, you say that a lot of that's feces on the ice, guess who gets a bath when we get home? One of these locations where the ice was totally gone is another one of these dart shafts. This is one that I haven't been able to share up until now. Would have never found it if there hadn't been a big rainstorm that had washed away some of that fecal lag deposit. There's a really crackerjack photographer here. Stop it, Craig, I keep hitting the wrong button. Really crackerjack photographer here in Livingston you might know by the name of Tom Murphy. Was able to very wonderfully have Tom assist with taking some stills. He said it's not my thing actually doing the studio photography, but he was up for it. And so you can see some of the sinew lashing here. There's a tiny little piece of that lashing that fell off of its own accord. Was able to get that submitted for a radiocarbon date. It's such a small sample. It's running with a batch of atmospheric samples at one of the places I'm affiliated with, so it'll be a really skookum good date on a very tiny sample, but it takes a very long time. So I can't tell you how old it is just yet, but I'm dying to know. It's got one of these conical bases on it, so it would have fit a socket, not unlike the thing I showed you a little while ago. Okay, so on to some animals. I told Mark I was going to go for 3 hours. No. So what's being hunted up here? This is Bob Garrett. Bob Garrett's a friend and colleague, now retired from Montana State, and you might recognize he's looking at a bighorn sheep skull. We do think that bighorn sheep are one of the dominant species that are up there. Why? Because that's what we find. We find lots and lots of bighorn sheep, but not lots and lots of whole bighorn sheep. We find lots and lots of bighorn sheep skulls. Okay, so what we're thinking is not unlike what Shoshone would do with the bighorn sheep traps, like down near Dubois and so forth, the ones that haven't burned up in the forest fires, is they would basically leave the bighorn sheep skulls there as basically a sympathetic connection, come back restorative and so forth. We've got a remarkable suite of ages on these bighorn sheep. You can see some of them going back more than half of 10,000 years, so 5,530. That's a raw radiocarbon age, not calibrated, 6,300 calibrated. Again, working with Dr. Beth Shapiro, but really with this awesome person is now, I should update this, it is Dr. Elizabeth Flesh. Dr. Flesh was able to work at microsatellites with ancient DNA that was extracted by Beth. She's no dumb bunny. She got a MacArthur Genius Grant when she was 26 to set up her first paleogenomics lab at University of California, Santa Cruz, if I've got that right. We're actively working on that manuscript as well. Probably one of the issues is me being slow on it, but I'm trying. We do some public-facing things. This is part and parcel when Mark and colleague John with Yellowstone Gateway Museum, John Gillespie with the board said, "Would you like to come and give a talk?" I feel like there's an obligation to do it. We've got a couple of state posters. Montana did theirs in 2010. I'd like to point out that Wyoming was about 8 years behind them getting one out. We've made a pretty remarkable video. Might be able to ask Mark to post that on the Yellowstone Gateway Museum web page. That QR code would get you there. We've had the anthropology club from Montana State University go traipsing around. They've come over to the Gateway Museum to look at the small exhibit. I don't want to tout the Draper in the slightest down there at the Buffalo, but they do have a small permanent exhibit set up on ice patch archaeology. If we can get the right space set up at Yellowstone Gateway, maybe we can do one here. Leaned in pretty hard to this film production. Wild Excellence Films, they've made something called Ice Stone Spirit, uncovering the stories of Yellowstone's first peoples. It'll be airing on PBS in Wyoming, I suspect within the next month or two. Montana PBS, they haven't figured out yet if they're gonna, Rocky Mountain PBS, Montana PBS, sorry, hasn't figured out yet if they'll show it. One of the things that I really love about it is that it's a lot of native voices first, and again, it's archaeology in a supporting role, and in a very, kind of colonial context. I feel like that's a cool thing. It's a cool narrative to pursue. That's my colleague, Dr. Shane Doyle. He might be known to some of you over in Livingston. Neat man. He's now the Indigenous Peoples' Rights lead for North America, the Caribbean, and Micronesia for the Nature Conservancy. So it's a huge role, massive role. So drivelines, let's talk drivelines for a few minutes. Most ice patches I think of as the ice patch itself is the attractant. The animals are going there to cool their hooves, to get water, to get the good forage that's nearby them. This is a particularly unusual one. It's a high elevation environment, and it's got a pass right above it. So there's a saddle. It's kind of hard to see, but maybe in this image there's no way you're going to see it. But the way the contour lines are working, basically, the saddle actually comes down in here right on top of this ice patch. Over a number of years, my colleagues and I have been out there surveying it. This is as big a troop of archaeologists as you'll ever see. Unbelievably to me, I'd been there, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. I'd never approached it from this angle, and I'd never recognized there was a drive line up there. So what you're looking at between the people there, you can see a stone there, stone pile there, you can see a stone pile there, you can see a stone pile there. I don't know if I have another one. We're just getting closer and closer to you, right? This is Rachel again. She's my long-suffering partner. This is Jamie Shane. It's probably Kathy Poosman. This is Staffan Peterson. He's the one-time park archaeologist in Yellowstone. Beth Horton is the best partner we've got. I mean, she's a remarkable human being. You kind of look at it from another angle here, and they are, I mean, they're remarkable when you see it for what it is. This is actually a second wing of the drive line where the stones are slabs and they're sort of set upright, but you can see that there's an orientation to them. They end, it's another shot. Can you see it going in the distance there? Okay, so I'm kind of hunkered down. This is actually a hunting blind. And so what's going on here is you have people, maybe just one person, lying low behind this hunting blind, and I think the animals are moving towards the ice patch. The ice patch is still an attractant, and as the animals are moving towards that ice patch, it's kind of one of these strategies where they're able to lie in wait, and when the animals get close, they'll try to take them. The number one species that I see up in this space is elk. I've seen the largest herds of elk in the alpine, hundreds and hundreds of animals. It's unbelievable. Some interesting things go on with this drive line, and I'll make a note of it. People continue to screw around with it. They're putting new rocks out on it. This one was picked up and put on it. Since that 2014 photo, last time I was up there, people had gone through and put sticks into them. This is another view of that drive line, or that hunting blind. It's a little better example. It's got my backpack there by it. The very first time I actually encountered that hunting blind, I thought it was like just a little a break wind for like a sheep herder or something like that, and it actually had a hole in top can in it. The hole in top can is gone. Somebody's taken the hole in top can out of it, and then they've added these sticks in, and they've moved around more rocks. I note this because it's interesting. A lot of times we think about the archaeological record as static. I don't know the motivations for why people would do this sort of thing. It always kind of worries me because I sort of feel like if it's not a tribal person, they're taking some liberties, right? You want to make sure that you don't engage in too much of cultural appropriation, but maybe they have an agenda. I don't know. These are stacked cairns. We're going to go on a field trip, weather permitting, on Saturday. So Nelson Stories very kindly allowed us to go to the family ranch, look at some of these drive lines. These are down in the Paradise Valley. Drive lines are, in a way, you could kind of consider them site furniture, right? You don't use a drive line. You don't put together a stack of cairns. You don't put together a stack of cairns and then use it, or let's say not use it, and then put it all back, right? You kind of leave it in place in anticipation that you might return, or in anticipation that you might true it up or do something more with it. It's my colleague Jack Fisher taking a picture of me and me taking a picture of him along the edge of this drive line. The ones on the Story Ranch are pretty remarkable. They're, right, like I say, on private property, but they're emblematic of the drive lines that exist in the valley. Looks like I wrote a lot of text there. I say, well, the traditional ecological knowledge, TEK, of many indigenous groups encodes knowledge of driveline systems, and the features have been studied by generations of archaeologists. A disconnect exists in the appreciation of this grounded knowledge to modern animal management. Well, I think that's true. What you're looking at here in red are all of the drive lines that exist in this area of Paradise Valley around the Chico Fan, for instance. I am very cautious about showing specific site locations because, again, the goal is to not facilitate people monkeying around. But I will tell you that this particularly dense area is not so far away from Chico, just for orientation. And what we've done is we've stylized stylized basically the flow of the Yellowstone River as it moves down the valley, and then these are the sides of the floodplain in the hard black lines. And so you can see the drive lines really are not outside of the floodplain, they're down on the floodplain. My wonderful colleague, Dr. Scott Dursum, put together at probably great numbers of gray hairs on his head, a selection of, I think, about 5 papers went together sort of talking about hunter-gatherer ecology and focusing in part in the greater Yellowstone area. This was actually published in that suite of papers in about 2022. And somehow or other, when I was putting this together, I thought it made a lot of sense to put a bunch of text on there. I really don't want you to have to suffer through that. What I'm trying to say is that if this is a mile, our scale, so 0, half mile, 1 mile, can you imagine the amount of person hours it takes to stack rocks, right? I mean, even if we all said, let's get out of here and go out and see it and do a little subset and see how we can do down on the Yellowstone floodplain, we would be sick to death of that in about 30 minutes and trying to get back in here to have another pint. And that's what I would be trying to do. This is like generational level knowledge of animal behavior. Are they doing this haphazardly? No, the hell no. You don't invest that kind of effort unless you have a very good plan in your mind's eye, knowledge, right, that there's going to be a pretty good troop of animals that are going to come by and you're going to be able to engage with them. Colleagues sometimes ask me, they say, well, how do you know it's bison? Well, the number of drive lines associated with kill sites where we've actually dug at the bottom of them, we've pulled out genuinely, it's almost always bison. Occasionally you get like one deer that was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe it died there later. The problem with going out and investigating or excavating in one of these locations, the amount of effort that it takes to excavate, let's say, a square meter of a bison kill, the digging of it's not so hard, but the responsible cataloging, analysis of the breakage patterns of the bones, the recording of it, it's probably a factor of about 40 to 1 for every hour that you spend digging. You're going to spend 40 hours analyzing. So if you have a 1 meter square that you've excavated, I mean, that's a half a year's worth of work. Let's say you dig 10 square meters. I mean, and then you have a responsibility to deal with it for the rest of time, right? I mean, it's got to go somewhere. The onus is, you've removed it from its context. You've just effectively destroyed where it was. So it's not something to be undertaken lightly, right? So I already said that. The black bands represent the 10 miles tolerance zones where the bison get killed, blah, blah, blah. What's the big deal, though? In terms of the animal behavior, I don't have a dog in the fight on the hunting, honestly. I mean, I don't actually want to piss off the ranchers in the slightest. I mean, I'm a beef eater. You don't get to have a physique like mine if you don't do that kind of thing. Sorry, but it matters very much that we remain a brucellosis-free state. We need to be able to ship our beef internationally. There's major markets out there. There are rules that are in place for that. What I worry about, though, is when we talk about places, even like Yellowstone, I was busy singing their praises, and Dr. Beth Horton, you can't describe those ecosystems as intact and complete without human predation. I mean, we were absolutely, human beings, Native Americans, were absolutely positively one of the apex predators that were engaging, participating in that ecosystem. I don't want it to come across like they're uber killing machines by any stretch. These are people that had absolutely, poetic knowledge of what animal behavior was, where the resources were, when the animals were going to be in those locations, and their ability to engage in that space is absolutely represented by what would have been a very natural, normal migratory route to get bison out of the caldera, get them out of that cold wasteland that can be Yellowstone in a normal winter, and down into beautiful country, further south into Paradise Valley, down the Yellowstone River, out towards Billings. I mean, come on, if it was dumping snow, where do you want to go? Get the hell out of Yellowstone. I mean, occasionally my colleague Mary Marr would argue with me and she'd say, oh, there's some bison that would stay up there. Yeah, there would be, but it's not the bulk of them. I think that the most of them would come out. My colleague Chris Boyer very kindly bootlegs projects for me frequently. He did a neat little one on this fan. Some of you might recognize it, where he flew it with, is that my timer to be done? I know. You're good, I'm teasing you. He flew over this fan, and what we were trying to do was use structure from motion photography. I keep hitting the wrong button, I'm sorry on that. We were trying to use structure from motion photography to see if we could see some of these little, man, if I keep doing that, come on now. Well, maybe there we go. All right, now go to this button. Why would they put the kill screen button right next to the forward button? I don't know. It's like, do not touch this. These are what the drivelines look like out there on that fan. You can barely see them in the images. I mean, this one is a showboat, right? It's probably that's not my hat, that's some flags on it, but others of these, they're really quite low to the ground, but when you see it, you know it for what it is. It's put in a sequence of events. We've got another one down here. And what we were hoping we'd be able to do with the aerial photography and the structure from motion is that we'd be able to pick out where the drive lines are, and you're going to look at that and you say, oh, well, that's interesting. It doesn't really seem like that much of a pattern. Maybe there's something going on there. Maybe it's so if you do the real image for it, you can see there's a road, there's some stuff strewn out along the road. You're actually still looking at a drive line. My poster's fallen down. This talk's off the rails, but here I'll light up where the drive line is. Is that exactly the spot where you were looking? No, but now that you know where it is, right, you can see that little stringer, and then with this high elevation imagery, we really can't see anything more of it. As I'm standing here looking at it on this giant screen, I can see there's a few more here that I didn't put red circles around. Damn it. Well, it is an asinine design. Come on here. Come back. Tell me if I get that back. That's a nice way to wrap the talk up. Okay, here we go. Chico fan, modern harvest zone. What's to be said about it? Bison cross the park's northern boundary in search of food in the face of harsh winters. Hunting is confined to small areas of public land just north of the park. It's kind of euphemistically called a wall of lead. The park's total bison population in 2023 was about 6,000. My colleague Brent French did an article discussing this, and he said as of March 2023, I couldn't find numbers for 24 or 25 or 26. The total hunter kills in March of 2023 was about 1,000 bison. Thing that I think is a take-home from that is kind of my last point on this slide. And I'll get to that in a half second, but we're going to have to slog through this, and then you're going to be done. Strengthening tribal interaction with GYE animal populations is significant and laudable. How would it not be? It reaffirms and sustains traditional relationships between living tribal cultures and keystone species such as bison. We all know, we can read in the newspaper the efforts that like Wind River has gone through under Jason Baldy's, for example, to be a champion of trying to keep that bison population hale. Other tribes as well. Archaeological observations can support these efforts by empirically demonstrating the prolonged interaction of humans and GYA fauna and is a practical use for archaeological data in support of TEK. Modern bison continue to attempt to leave the park and caldera to the north down the Yellowstone River Valley. One of the things that I failed to mention with the driveline hunting, my friend and colleague Dalen Grindle, she is Cracker Jack smart, she's Shoshone, she's Arapaho, Here within the last 5 years, she completed her PhD at Harvard. She basically had walking papers to go anywhere she wanted to. She could do so many things. She wanted to go home to Lander. She understands quality of life. Now, I gotta tell you, I've been so jealous of my last basically 2 days in Livingston. It reminds me so much of what I used to think of Bozeman being like, and yet it's better. So I understand why she would want to go back, and not be stuck right out east somewhere. It's a gift. One of the things that she studied in her dissertation was encoding Native people's knowledge of animal behaviors. I would encourage you to look up her dissertation. One of the things that she discussed was about how certain drivelines, including those drivelines on the Story Ranch, actually parallel, in many instances, the cliff face, the dominant cliff face. One of the reasons that they do that, actually, at least in her perception, is that if you can get the animals moving along the face of that, and an animal, starts to butt up against one of the taller cairns, it might jump left, it might jump right. If it jumps right, it goes over the cliff. If it jumps left, it's okay. You want the lead cows, who are the knowledge bearers, to have the most view. So they're running forward, you're hazing them along the edge of that. They're not running over the edge of the cliff, but you're picking off the younger ones and the subpopulation, right, within the cows. So you preserve that matriarchal cow structure. Think of how many generations worth of knowledge we've continued to wipe out of the bison in Yellowstone by not letting them migrate out of the park. I understand why they can't, but I also don't want to pretend that it's like an intact ecosystem and they want to be there, okay? It's very clear based on animal behavior that they would be a migratory or movable species. Sure, you're gonna get the couple old bulls that hang out there and just be weirdos, because that's what they do. But right, it's not a functioning ecosystem at present, okay? And I think it's important that when we talk about it, we want to see sort of as much truth in there as we can. And I would really love to work into a space. I just don't have it in my ability to do any kind of the genetics that inoculate the bison, for instance, and make it so they can't carry the brucellosis. But the fact of the matter is, if we're close enough now to being able to bring back dire wolves, and they're working on mammoths, how are we not going to be able to get on top of this little issue and then at least allow for that to be one less factor that would hamper bison getting out of the park in the wintertime? I think I have a pretty slide. Hit the right button. Okay. That's all. Thank you.